Wow, how the world has changed. It was only a few months ago I was on stages presenting to people where they could high five and hug each other. But those days have now gone. COVID-19 has seen to that. So the only way now to present your message to the people and make an impact upon their lives is to do it virtually. But if you're anything like me, going and pivoting from live presentations where you have instant feedback from the audience to virtual presentations where it's just you and the camera, that's been hard. But what I have found is by focusing and shifting on a few key elements, we are still able to engage, entertain, and educate our audiences. My name is Gary Lafferty, and I help people create and develop powerful presentations that get them new leads, new clients, and new sales. And in this 3-part video series, I'm going to share with you the 3 key shifts and the 3 key focuses that we can use to make sure that we keep our audiences entertained, educated, and informed, and have them on the edge of their seats. Now, you're probably already aware that public speaking skills and continuous learning in the public speaking field is critical to enhance your career and build your business. But did you also know that it's not that way around to the listener? 4 out of 5 professionals in a recent survey had already admitted to focusing their attention away from the presenter in the last presentation they attended. Which is why, as professional speakers, we must make sure that we have the skill set necessary to keep them engaged from the beginning to the very end. In this 3-part video series, I'm going to share with you the 3 key shifts needed to ensure that you present like a pro and master the virtual presentation. The first part is to get and keep your audience's attention. Getting your audience attention from the very beginning and keeping it throughout your presentation. How many times have you been on a presentation and you've seen a presenter captivate you from the very beginning, yet other presenters bore you and send you to sleep? The first part about knowing how to captivate your audience is what we're going to be covering in the first video. In the second video is how to interact with your audience. Interact with them online. Things that we used to be able to do when we did it live, we can no longer do virtually. So how do we keep them interactive with us and engaged with everything we're about to say? That's going to be in video number 2. And in video number 3, I'm going to show you how to master your virtual stage. Mastering your virtual stage online is completely different to doing it live. So these key 3 things is going to be absolutely essential so that you can present like a pro in your next presentation. Not only online, because when the world opens up again, which more than likely looks like it's going to be late 2021, you'll have the skill set to be a pro speaker. Now, this training is for you if you are used to giving presentations at seminars, workshops, conferences, but now have to present virtually. Whether you like it or not, online presentations are here to stay. Now, there are 3 main reasons for this. The first is far more convenient. We can have organizers, presenters, and attendees all in different places of the world listening to the one presentation. There is far less traveling involved. Number 2, it is far more convenient with regards to organizing. We can organize an event now in a matter of hours and days as opposed to days and weeks. And of course, we have social distancing. And for the foreseeable future, big events and large gatherings are probably going to be a thing of the past. Now, moving from live presentations to virtual presentations is hard, even for professional seasoned speakers. And if you're worried about moving and doing your first or ongoing virtual presentations, this video is going to be for you. My name is Gary Lafferty, and it wasn't too long ago that an airport lounge was my second home. Every 10 days to 2 weeks, I used to be on a plane flying to one corner of the globe or another to give a live presentation. I've shared stages with business leaders, celebrities, and sports personalities. Heck, I even wrote a best-selling book about speaking from stage. But the world has changed. COVID-19 hit, and all of a sudden, international travel stopped. Large gatherings, finished. Seminars, workshops, conventions, all a thing of the past. But the good news is that 90% of a great presentation, whether that be a live presentation or a virtual presentation, is exactly the same. It's just knowing what the 10% difference is between live and virtual to make sure that your audience is kept engaged, entertained, and educated when you make that pivot. Now let's look at the anatomy of a perfect presentation. Now, along the bottom axis, we'll have entertainment value, and along the vertical axis, we have the information value. And no matter what presentation you've ever attended or given, our presentations would always tend to fall into one of these four categories. So, let's look at the first category. If the first category, let's say the presentation is pretty low on engagement, pretty low on entertainment, and the quality of the content is pretty poor and low, then that's what we would call the boring presentation, the boring quadrant. It's very hard to have an interesting presentation and to keep your audience engaged if you are low on both entertainment and information. Now, if it was high on entertainment, but low on information, then that would be what we would call the show presentation. It's very rah-rah, we've all been to those before, it's enjoyable to be there, but the content that we take away, pretty poor. If it is low on entertainment, but high on content, that's information overload. There's a lot of information coming from the presenter, not a lot of engagement, not a lot of entertainment, and with regards to information, it's completely overloading your audience. So the ideal one would be in the fourth quadrant, the infotainment. And that's where the information given is high and the entertainment is high. And that's where we can keep our audience engaged and entertained and educated in one presentation. Now, the three essential shifts needed to move from live presentations to virtual presentations that we can control is number one, keeping their attention. We know it's harder to keep their attention in a virtual environment than it is a live environment. Number two, we must get to know our audience more before our presentation so that we can keep their engagement and keep their attention throughout a presentation. And number three is mastering our stage. So let's look at the first thing, which is getting and keeping their attention. Now, there are three keys to getting and keeping our attention or their attention when it comes to virtual presentations. And the first is to make sure you give a powerful opening, making sure that from the very get-go of your presentation, you get their attention so they know they're in the right place, listening to the right person. Now, the second is constant interaction, not just touching base with them every now and again throughout your presentation, but making a consistent effort and doing things that will make sure our audience is interacted with so it becomes a two-way street. And the third element is making sure we put more storytelling into our presentations. So the first one is powerful openings. Now, there are 5 key elements to a powerful opening. The first is to deliver your hook. Now, before we go any further, the old adage of tell them what you're going to tell them and tell them what you told them is wrong, okay? Because well, let me just explain why it's wrong. Imagine turning up to a cinema and you're sat down, you've got your popcorn, you've got your pop, and you are sitting there eagerly waiting for the new show to begin, the new film to begin. And up comes the star of the show, let's say it's Tom Cruise, and he says, well, in this movie, what's going to happen is that there's going to be some bad guys, and then I am called in to save that, and I have to do a lot of action shots, but eventually, after it looks like I'm hurt, I end up saving the day. Now, how would you feel if you've already been told what was going to happen? You must have an element of surprise, an element of anticipation for your audience to know that this is worth staying for, that this is worth going through, whether it be a 20-minute presentation or a 45-minute presentation virtually. You want to be able to capture them from the very beginning by using a powerful hook. The next is to give a confident introduction. Now, when I say a confident introduction, this is stating your name, but not your resume. This is not about how long you've been in business and the awards you've won. This is so they understand that the person they're listening to is the right person, is that they're in the right place, as I said, listening to the right person at the right time. Then number 3 is to state your credentials. And as I said, it's not about your resume. This is about how you are qualified to teach them what you are about to teach them. And I'll give you an example of how these 5 keys work in a minute. And the 4th is to introduce your agenda or what you're going to be sharing with them in no more than 3 to 5 steps. And the last is to share a factual statement. Show that you are the expert in that field and share something with them that they may not have known. Now, I did say to you that I would share an example of a great opening for you. So here goes. In today's video, I'm going to share with you how you can captivate your audience's attention in the first 30 seconds of any presentation. Hi, my name is Gary Lafferty, and I help people develop and deliver powerful presentations that get some new leads, new clients, and new sales. Now, I'm going to share with you my 3-step system that will enable you to entertain, educate, and engage with your audience in every presentation you do from here on in. Now, you're probably already aware that public speaking skills is absolutely essential in growing your business or enhancing your career. But did you also know that in a recent research survey, 4 out of 5 professionals had admitted to switching their attention away from the presenter in the last presentation that they attended? So let's break down the 5 elements in that introduction I just gave. Now, that introduction was about 30 seconds or so, and it had the 5 elements. The first element was the hook. Now, the hook was to captivate that audience. In fact, that was the title, that was the hook of that introduction. And I'm going to show you how to captivate any audience in the first 30 seconds of your presentation. That allows the audience to understand that they're in the right place, listening to the right presentation that's going to help them. Now, the second element is to give a confident introduction, and that's stating your name in such a way that shows confidence and experience. Now, if you notice, I said my name in what I call a low tone, which I finished on a low tone, which is, hi, my name is Gary Lafferty, as opposed to what I'll call a high tone, which is something like, hi, my name is Gary Lafferty. Can you see the difference? One shows experience and the one shows nervousness, if you like. The third is to state the credentials, stating your credentials. Now, I could have said, I'm a public speaker, I'm a public speaker coach, and I've been coaching people for 17 years, and I'm accredited by this coaching association, I'm accredited by that speaking association. I could have gone on that, but that was more about me. When you state your credentials, it should be more about your audience. So what I said was, I help people develop and deliver powerful presentations that help them get more leads, more sales, and more clients. Can you see how it's more orientated towards the client, towards your audience, as opposed to orientated towards the speaker? Now, the 5th was to share a factual statement. And it went something along the lines of, now you're already aware that public speaking skills is essential in growing your business or enhancing your career. But did you also know that in a recent survey, 4 out of 5 professionals had admitted to switching their attention away from the presenter in the last presentation they attended? You can state a fact that they have not heard before. That will ensure that they understand that they are listening to a professional and an expert in their field. Now that we've covered the 5 steps to giving a powerful opening to get their attention, let's look at how we can keep their attention. So the next stage to look at is constant interaction. I'm sure you've attended presentations before, live or virtual, where it just sounded like the Charlie Brown, the Charlie Brown teacher, because that was when it was one-sided. a great presentation, an infotainment presentation, should always be a two-way street. Now, as the recent survey showed, 4 out of 5 professionals had admitted to switching their attention away from the presenter in the last presentation they attended, which is why we must make sure that we entertain our audience and keep them engaged with what we're saying in our virtual presentation. So I'm going to share with you my 5 tips for keeping their attention. And the first is to let them know that's what you're going to do. You're going to let them know that you want this to be a two-way presentation. You want their engagement. Tip 1 is to jot this down. Let your audience know that you would expect them to write things down, so make sure they have a pen and paper handy, and that you may or may not test them throughout the presentation. Now, this is something I've been doing for many years now in live and virtuals. I make sure I tell them to write things down, and I'll say, write this down. I would literally tell them to jot it down or write it down. And then throughout the presentation, I might ask them a question or pick on one of the delegates or one of the audiences and say, now, what did I say about this? So, for example, I could have said, what was the first thing in a great opening? And as you already know, is to have a good hook. So getting them to write things down enables them to be interactive, so it's not a one-way street. They're not only listening to you, but they're being interactive and writing it down. And therefore your message will be retained not only through the duration of your presentation, but after your presentation as well. Tip 2 is raise your hand. Getting your audience to raise their hand and be interactive with you. Now, in a live presentation, you do this all the time, I am sure. You'd say something along the lines of, raise your hand if you're here because you're looking to have ways to increase your business. Or raise your hand if you are here because you would like to know the 5 ways to make more money. And you will naturally do that in your presentation, no doubt. But don't be afraid to do that in a virtual presentation as well. Getting people to raise their hand in a presentation just to say hi, or even ask them the same question. Raise your hand if you are here because you are looking at ways to make more money in your business, or whatever question you would like to ask them. But call people out who don't raise their hand. Now, one trick I tend to do in presentations, both live and virtual, is to make sure that I have as many of the room, whether that be virtual or live, raise their hand as possible. And one of the ways I do that is to ask 2 or 3 questions that kind of gets everybody involved. So it could be something along the lines of, raise your hand if you are here to learn ways to improve your business. Now, also raise your hand if you are here because you're looking at a way to make more money in your business. Now, that would engage majority of the audience. But what happens if I don't have all the audience? Well, that's when I will ask my 3rd question. And my 3rd question is, raise your hand if you have no intention of ever raising your hand whenever I ask you. And that would engage majority of the audience. It also might get a little bit of a giggle or a laugh, and then we're off to the races because we now have an engaged audience. But also remember to do this constantly throughout your presentation and not just at the beginning. Make sure that you're asking them consistently, let's say every 2 to 3 minutes throughout your presentation, either by raising their hand or they can even write something on a piece of paper. Which leads me to tip number 3, show their engagement. Getting them to show what they've written down on their piece of paper, no matter what it is, whether it's hi or I've got it or yep, and just pull them out and say, right, I want you to write down the answer to this, or I want to write down how you feel, and I want you to hold it up to the camera so that everybody can see. And just getting them to get that form of engagement is also another way. a great way to get them interactive and to share in their room. Now, in a live presentation, what tends to happen? When you ask them to do something, the first thing they're going to look left, they're going to look right, and they're going to see who's engaging, who's not engaging, because they want the social proof that everyone's doing it. So when you get someone to hold up their piece of paper and show the others that they are engaged with you as a presenter, that would get more of them engaged. Now, the more you do this, the more engagement you're going to get. Tip 4 is the use of online polls. Most of the online meeting platforms have polls that you can use. Now you can write and type up these polls before your presentation and then bring them into your presentation as and when you are ready. And by getting them to interact with you by saying, keep it simple by the way, keep them, either a quick multiple choice of 3 to 5 or a quick yes and no question. And then share those poll results with your audience. There's nothing more engaging and pleasing or shocking to an audience to see that their answer was in the top most appreciated answer. So for example, you might say, how many of you love doing presentations? And let's just say majority of them don't. All right, so you can see that majority was, let's say 70% was no and 30% was yes. Then those in the no go, yes, I have social proof that I'm in the group where people are afraid of presentations, which now allows you to help them with their fear. So make sure you use polls as well. And tip 5 is bring the energy. Bring as much energy as you can to the camera, because the camera is your audience. In a live scenario, we actually have an audience and we can get that energy back from them immediately, immediate feedback. But when it comes to virtual, we have the camera. So bring the energy to the camera. The audience will see it, they'll also feel it, and they will feel far more engaged with you throughout your presentation. So those are my 5 tips for keeping engagement. So how do we keep them even more engaged? Well, that comes on to the third element of storytelling. Now, storytelling is such a powerful way to keep your audience engaged, but also to keep them captivated with words rather than just numbers and data. And the reason why that is because firstly, it speaks to people's emotions. Numbers, data, figures, facts, they all speak to the logical part of our brain. When you tell stories, it speaks to our emotional part. It speaks to our history of what has been, what could be. It also builds common ground, because when you tell a story and you bring people into your story, it allows them to feel themselves inside that fact that they are there experiencing what you're trying to explain. And thirdly, it creates contrast of what can be achieved. We are here today. This is what happens. This is what could happen if we did this. So there's 3 fantastic and powerful reasons why we should get better at storytelling. It is the late 1940s, early 1950s. The world is pulling itself up from the effects of the Second World War. The economy is down, but improving, and jobs are few and far between. For an enterprising, young marketing executive, he's had enough no's. He's had enough doors slammed in his face. He's had enough rejection letters saying that they weren't employing any more people. But please do keep in mind, and they will look to employ more people as the economy grows in the years to come. Well, obviously, this young executive had a family to feed. He couldn't just keep taking no's. So he approached a particular CEO of a cosmetics company and said, I don't want a job, but give me an opportunity. I will take a share of the profits, the increased profits on a particular product. Let me prove to you that I can increase the sales and the profits of a particular product for you. You don't have to pay me a salary, but only pay me upon results. Well, the enterprising CEO said, hey, what else have I got to lose? Of course, you're not getting a salary, But if you can improve the sales and the profits of a particular product, you can have a share of the increased sales and profits of that product. Get to work. Well, within days, the marketing executive was at his desk. What he did was he took one particular product and added 2 words. Those 2 words was and repeat. Now, if you take a jar or bottle of your favorite shampoo, in fact, you can go and do this in a minute. Don't do it now while you're listening to me, but go to your bathroom after this training video and look at your bottle. And after it says rinse and lather your hair, then it will say rinse and repeat. Lather your hair and rinse, and now it will say and repeat. Those 2 words revolutionized the shampoo industry and the cosmetic industry, and it also revolutionized the wealth of this young man. And what it goes to show is that sometimes the smallest changes make the biggest differences in the world. And that was an example of a very brief story. You see, stories don't have to be complicated. In fact, most stories, most films, most theatres, most books are based upon a story that are broken down into 3 simple acts. So when you create a story, whatever story you want to come up with to explain your particular product, your particular point of view, your particular service, try and break it down into these 3 acts. Act 1 is the overview, the scene, the exposition. Give a background of what it was. And that's the story I told you. It was the late 1940s, early 1950s. The world is dragging itself up off its knees from the war. Give an idea of what it was like. That's Act 1. Act 2 are the actions that were taken and the conflicts that those actions caused. Now, you've all seen those memes or those diagrams where everyone thinks an entrepreneur's journey from 0 to hero is a straight line. It's not. It is full of conflicts and twists and turns, and every story is. It'd be quite a boring story if they decided to become very successful and became very successful overnight. There's always going to be actions that they took that caused the conflicts. Actions they did not take that caused the conflict. So Act 1, create the scene, create the scenario. Act 2 is the actions. Describe the actions that were needed to be taken or that were taken, and then describe the conflicts that those actions took. And Act 3. Act 3 is the result that the actions caused. The results that happened because of those actions. So what happened was he used the words and repeat. It doubled the sales. In fact, it quadrupled the sales and more, 10x if you like, those figures from the early 50s. Revolutionized the industry, revolutionized the guy's wealth. And then explained the moral of the story. Explained the moral of the smallest differences make the largest differences. The smallest changes make the largest differences. Storytelling is relatively easy if you just break it down into those 3 acts. How many stories can you put into your presentation? If you can describe your product, your service, your numbers, your data, your resources, and put those into stories, your presentation will be far more engaging to your audiences. So those are the 3 key elements that we need to focus on to make sure that we get and keep our audience's attention. So number 1, first key, make sure you have a fantastic opening, a powerful opening. Number 2, constant interaction. And number 3, more use of storytelling. You use those 3 and you'll be able to keep and engage your audience from the beginning to the very end of your virtual presentations. So that wraps up our first video on getting and keeping your audience's attention. Now, there are 2 more videos to come, as you know, getting to know your audience so you can interact with your audience on a far more professional scale virtually, and mastering your virtual stage. Those 2 videos are coming up, so make sure you make some time to watch those 2 videos. Now, if there's anything else you'd like to know about presenting, whether presenting live or virtual, please do follow me on my Facebook page or my LinkedIn page. Details are coming, as you can see. Ask me any questions. I'd love to hear how you're getting on as a presenter, and if there's anything else I can do to help you become a far better speaker. Until next time, happy presenting.